I said, no. I said, what am I going to speak about? He says, you're going to share your story. I said, I don't have a story. He says, yes, you do. And I said, no, thank you. And I walked away. The next day, he says, Nick. I'm like, yes. He said, listen, I understand that you're a little scared. I'm like, are you kidding me? Do you know that the biggest fear in the world is public speaking, and the second biggest fear is actually death itself? So some people would rather die before they become a public speaker. He says, let me arrange the first speech. I'm like, you're crazy. He said, yes, at the school we have the Jesus Club, and you know, you should blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, leave me alone. The next day he says, speak. I said, no. Next day I look at him, he looks at me, and I walk away. He starts running after me. After 3 months, he twisted my arm, and I said, okay. And I got in front of everyone, and I was freaking out. My palms were sweating, my knees were shaking. I didn't know what I was going to say. Then all of a sudden, I hear a girl go, and I'm like, what's wrong? Nothing. I said, why are you crying? She says, I don't know. I was just touched. I'm like, who touched you? Here I am at age 17 talking about hope, and someone is moved to tears. Do you see my table up here? This is, for instance, as an illustration, the timeline. When I'm 8 years old, I had no idea what exceedingly abundantly beautiful and imaginable things were ahead. You know, my doctors told my parents that I would never go to school. Why? Because when I was able to go to school on my age bracket, my country where I lived in, Australia, okay, the law back then was that in 1989, if you had a child with a disability, they would not be allowed to go to a mainstream school. And so my doctor said I would never go to school, but they didn't know that God would use my mom to then go to Victoria education system and say, why don't you let my son go to school? And they said, okay. And we were the first family to then make a trailblaze difference in that country since 1989. The doctors didn't know that, but God knew that. The doctors and my parents, and not even me. I never thought that then I would be able to travel around the world and meet many, many people. If you have those two photos, then you should have the third photo. I don't know if you've got them the third.